Before we get started, I wanted to share something exciting. I've launched a brand new channel called Index Unknown. It's where I dig into the real-world mysteries behind the stories, secrets, theories, conspiracies, and the kinds of things they don't want you to know. The very first video is out now, and it's all about Atlantis. Was it just a legend, or could it have been a real place? If you're curious, and if you want to hear it in my real voice, something I've been training for a while now, I'll leave the link down below. Now, let's get into today's story. They say there's a kind of madness in wanting more than the world will give you. For most, that hunger burns quietly, hidden behind polite smiles and modest dreams. But for a few, it takes wings. Bellerophon was one of those few. A hero in every sense the poets could invent. Slayer of monsters, favored by the gods, master of the winged horse Pegasus. His name was carried across kingdoms in songs and stories, his victories unmatched by any living man. And yet, it wasn't enough. Because glory, once tasted, can become a craving. And for Bellerophon, the highest peaks were no longer on the earth. He began to wonder if he belonged among the immortals themselves. So one day he climbed onto Pegasus's back, set his eyes on the heights of Olympus, and rose into the clouds. The air thinned, the gates of the gods came into view, and the heavens turned him away. When he fell, he learned the truth. That the gods' greatest punishment is not anger, it's indifference. This is the story of Bellerophon, the hero who mistook his victory over beasts for the right to stand among the gods. Long before his name was carried in songs and carved into the memory of Greece, he was known as Hippones, a prince of Corinth, born into a lineage that mixed nobility with something far more dangerous. His father, Glaucus, ruled the city, but it was his grandfather whose shadow stretched the farthest. Sisyphus, the trickster king condemned to roll a boulder uphill for all eternity, a man who had outwitted death itself and been punished by the gods for it. In a land where bloodlines were both pride and prophecy, that heritage was a double-edged sword. It promised sharpness of mind, resilience, and cunning, but it also carried the weight of divine suspicion. The Greeks believed such traits did not vanish with a generation. If Sisyphus had defied the gods, then perhaps his grandson might too. Of Hippones's youth, the poets say little. He trained as all princes did, learning to fight from horseback, to run in armor without faltering, to throw the spear straight and true. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and strong in the way of men born to command. Those who met him in his early years remembered a certain quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. Not arrogance, but the unshakable bearing of someone who believed they belonged anywhere they stood. Then came the moment that would strip him of that place entirely. The sources disagree on the details. Some say he killed a man named Bellerus by accident, perhaps in the hunt or during a contest. Others claim it was a deliberate act, the result of a quarrel turned deadly. In either telling, the crime could not be ignored. In the ancient world, blood demanded reckoning. To remain in Corinth would mean facing vengeance from the dead man's kin, or trial, or death. And so Hippones left, casting aside his birth name. From that moment forward, he was Bellerophon, slayer of Belarus, a name that would come to carry both glory and ruin in equal measure. The poets do not linger on every detail of Bellerophon's face, but they leave enough for us to picture the man who would one day ride Pegasus. He was tall for his time, broad in the chest and shoulders, with the long, balanced build of a trained horseman. Years of riding and spear work had hardened his arms, while the constant strain of armor and shield had thickened his frame without robbing him of speed. His hair, dark and thick, framed a face marked by the sharp planes of a nobleman's lineage. His jaw was strong, his nose straight, and his eyes, in some accounts gray, in others dark, were the kind that met a man's gaze without flinching. There was no wildness in them, no restless darting. Instead, they held a steady focus, as if every thought was weighed before it was spoken. That same steadiness shaped his reputation. Bellerophon was not known for boastful talk, nor for the reckless hunger for battle that defined other warriors. He fought with purpose, not fury, and measured his strikes as carefully as his words. Yet beneath that composure lay something harder to define, an appetite for challenge, the kind that draws a man toward the edge simply to see if he can stand there without falling. He was courteous where courtesy was due, respectful of rank and custom, but he was no flatterer. He treated kings and common soldiers with the same level gaze, and it was that quiet self-assurance, more than his height or his strength, that made others take notice. He did not demand respect. He carried it with him. It was this mix of restraint and confidence, of noble bearing and unspoken ambition, that would carry him through dangers no other man had survived, and in time, tempt him toward a height no mortal was meant to reach. Bellerophon's strength did not come from nowhere. It was rooted in a lineage known across Greece, for both its triumphs and its curses. As we briefly touched on earlier, his father, Glaucus, was king of Corinth, a man who ruled a thriving city at the crossroads of trade and power. But the true weight of Bellerophon's bloodline came from his grandfather, Sisyphus, a name that carried both admiration and dread. Sisyphus was a master of cunning, a man who had outwitted gods and men alike. He had chained Thanatos, the god of death, to keep mortality itself at bay. He had betrayed the trust of Zeus, deceived his fellow kings, and refused to accept the fate given to him. The price of such defiance was eternal punishment, to push a boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down again and again, forever. In the eyes of the Greeks, bloodlines were not just family history, they were prophecy. The nature of an ancestor could echo through the generations, shaping the lives of those yet unborn. To be a grandson of Sisyphus meant inheriting not only a name, but a shadow. People would expect cleverness, resilience, and daring from Bellerophon, and perhaps, too, the same dangerous impulse to test the patience of the gods. While Glaucus was normally said to be his mortal father, the truth is that he was actually the son of Poseidon himself, a claim that would explain his mastery over the winged horse Pegasus and his strength and feat that seemed to surpass the limits of mere mortals. His mother was Eurynome, the queen of Corinth, and a woman said to be wise, graceful, and in some versions, touched by divinity herself. This meant that from birth, the varied combination of his lineage allowed Bellerophon to claim not only the rule of kings, but a connection to the gods themselves. This heritage was a gift, opening doors, granting him status wherever he traveled. But it was also a burden. For in the world of Greek myth, the gods had long memories, and they rarely overlooked the descendants of those who had once defied them. Bellerophon's exile carried him far from Corinth through lands where his name was unknown and his lineage meaningless. In time, he came to Tiryns, a city ruled by King Protus, a man of power, wealth, and shrewd judgment. In the customs of the ancient world, a man who had killed, even by accident, could seek purification from a ruler. This was more than a symbolic act, it was a sacred cleansing, an appeal to both mortal authority and divine favor to erase the stain of blood guilt. Protus agreed, granting Bellerophon the ritual that restored his standing in the eyes of the gods. For a while, it seemed as if fortune had smiled on the wandering prince. He was welcomed as an honored guest, given a place at the king's table, and treated with the respect his bearing demanded. But peace in a royal court is often more fragile than it appears. Protus's wife, known as Thenoboia in some accounts, and Taea in others, soon became entangled in the story. Ancient sources differ on what happened next. Some say she desired Bellerophon and, when spurned, accused him of trying to seduce her. Others claim the accusation was entirely fabricated, a weapon in a quiet palace rivalry. Either way, her word carried weight, and her accusation placed Protus in a difficult position. To kill a guest outright would violate the sacred law of Xenia, the bond between host and guest, protected by Zeus himself. But to ignore his queen's charge would risk scandal and the loss of royal authority. Protus found a third way. He summoned Bellerophon, thanked him for his time in Tiryns, and sent him to Lycia with a sealed letter for King Iobates, his father-in-law. It was a gesture that seemed honorable, the passing of a guest to another ruler for further hospitality. But inside the letter was a message that would decide Bellerophon's fate. Kill the bearer of this note. Bellerophon's journey to Lycia took him across the Aegean's shifting waters and into the rugged heart of Anatolia, where Lycia's mountains rose steep and forbidding against the horizon. King Iobates received him with the open-handed courtesy expected of a ruler. Feasts